Thank you. So now I have to live up to hype, right? So which will be. Well, thank you for warm words and for inviting me here and for excellent barbecue. I really like barbecue. So effective end-to-end testing with Cypress. Did you see that? That was nice. So I've been very active. I've been fortunate enough to work for companies where I could do a lot of open source. So you can find all my code online on GitHub. You can find my blog posts. I used to work for a company that didn't allow open source contributions, so I quit that company. You can find my slides at slides.com, and I kind of had a journey from C++ to Java to C#, and then CoffeeScript, and then JavaScript. So now I do everything that touches JavaScript and doesn't touch CSS. A couple of companies I worked all around Boston, but now I work at Cypress. And I joined Cypress about a year ago. I was a very happy customer of Cypress, or user of Cypress, for a year before that. So we got lucky, we got accepted into Cypress beta before it went open source. We were so incredibly impressed with Cypress. So like Jeff, you talked about Matt Taylor, the former CTO of Kensho, where I used to work, and like we had screaming arguments about which end-to-end testing tool to pick, because I was advocating for this new, fresh, green tool, Cypress, and there are issues of trust and like, will this company survive? And I really was impressed, and I really pushed for it, and I never looked back. You can work at Cypress if you want to. We're a very small company, but we just closed a big financing round, so we'll be flush with cash for a while. So we especially need someone who knows how to do operations, right? Who knows how to scale servers, maintain them, deploy to AWS, Heroku, knows databases. Basically, right now we record a little bit less than 10 million test runs for our customers, our users, per month, and we want to record 1 billion. So we need a person who can do that, right? Okay, that's my spiel. The question to you, audience, why does everything suck, right? Like all the websites are broken, you have to reload the page. Like nothing really works. Open DevTools and just, watch the horror show. Like, Jeff, you know me, right? So like a couple of years ago, I had this curly, nice, brown hair, and when I opened my DevTools and I looked around, and overnight, like, it's all gray. Even companies that are supposed to be, right, really up with it, right, like Google, Microsoft, if you open the DevTools, they have errors all the time. Things get broken. Now, to be honest, I do run AdBlock. So this kind of prevents some of the scripts that they probably require from loading, but that's the internet, that's the World Wide Web. It's a jungle. Things constantly break, and not because you wrote bad code, but because something didn't load quickly enough, something was missing, something was misconfigured. Like the whole system did not work right. And every time you don't test the complete system that you deploy, your users are actually your testers. Except you have to pay testers, you don't have to pay the users, but they don't pay you if something is broken. If I cannot go to your e-commerce site, add an item to a to a cart, and then check out, I'm not going to pay you. So you go out of business and you move to Rhode Island. No offense. So don't let your users test your app, right? I didn't come up with that phrase. I wish I could, but this person was first. So this is my day-to-day kind of, and this is all of us, right? We constantly have fires. We try to keep cool, right? But it's not always possible. So we either burn out and we move on to another, we hope, better company, or we change careers. But how do we get to a happy place, right? So these people are obviously happy. It's a stock image of happy people. Look at them, right? It's very balanced, proportion of users for your website, but obviously the website is working. Now, the interesting thing about this picture, why I picked it, is that you don't know what laptop brand they're using, right? It was carefully photoshopped. So anyway, so my point is, I want to be in happy place. I want to write quality software and ensure that my users are happy. What's quality software? The quality software to me doesn't have a metric, doesn't have a defining principle that describes the code. No. The quality software is the software or website or API that works the way the users expect it to work. So users never expect the website to crash. We can agree on that. The users don't tell you, but they expect your website to load reasonably quickly. And if it doesn't load reasonably quickly, they leave, they vote with their feet, they buy from someone else. The users expect items to be addable to your check card and when the payment being processed and the item shipped. It all depends on the expectations. Unfortunately, there is no foolproof way of writing software and deploying it and being like 100% sure that it will be working, right? So the only reasonable way we know to kind of check for quality software is to write tests, right? So we need to write some tests. We can write different types of tests. This is a testing pyramid that everyone kind of shows, right? Google tried to trademark, they couldn't trademark triangle. Apparently someone invented triangle before them, but. So at the bottom you have a lot of unit tests, right? The bottom is very wide. We write a lot of unit tests because we have such great tools for writing unit tests. You pick Mocha, Tape, Jest, Ava, whatever you want. They're great tools, support a lot of options, are really easy to set up, and it's really easy to test a small piece of code, right? At unit level, we're testing the smallest components, smallest functions. But then, every function can work by itself, but together it makes no sense. We can all agree on that. I'm not poo-pooing like unit testing. I wrote an AngularJS unit testing library called ngDescribe at Kensho, and I loved it, right? It helped me to actually write good AngularJS apps. I even went to a couple meetups, including New York. I forgot if I actually did it here. I probably did, but I don't remember, and I couldn't find it. But you can find ngDescribe and still use it for AngularJS testing, right? For unit testing. And I even have a picture from the Meetup where I showed ngDescribe, and things were really primitive a couple of years ago, right? It wasn't as advanced. But okay, so unit testing is easy. Let's not focus on that. Now let's put things together. Let's put one component with service, maybe our front-end components with an API from a server. And this immediately will find problems between components, right? By itself it works, but turns out it's not that useful. Because there's mismatch of documentation, English is ambiguous, requirement governing is non-existent. So the integration tests are great. Sometimes things just don't work together, right? From the standpoint of a user, this is already better. Because now the user can actually see. But the users don't see integration tests. They don't see a couple of components working together, but the end is stopped. It still is a tool for you, for developer. And that's the goal of a quality software. The quality software is to make sure the users experience quality, not you. So let's get to the top of the pyramid, the end-to-end testing, right? Where you test a complete system. It could be a locally running website, right? Or locally running API. It could still stop some parts, like it could stop the payment system, but you're already working the whole thing. Maybe you deployed it to staging, but you're testing the full thing. You're testing almost exactly how a user would use your software. And immediately you will find bugs, right? And misconfigure things. So kind of like that. You build a bathroom, but you build it wrong. Does anyone not see a problem here? Okay, good. We're on the same page. So forget the pyramid. Let's talk about pizza slice. To the users, the end-to-end tests are really important. Because if you have a lot of end-to-end tests and they consistently pass, that means when the user goes and does the same thing, the chances are much higher that the thing is going to work. The unit tests are really important to me as a developer. That's how I code algorithms, that's how I test for edge cases. The edge cases especially because they're really hard to test through end-to-end, right? Because your front end might actually prevent the edge cases in data to propagating to the database code that you're writing and trying to ensure is working. So, okay, situation is dire, there are no good tools. Phantom.js has been discontinued. Puppeteer is a great tool, but it's not a testing tool specifically. It's a general thing. It's kind of like Node.js to Jest or Tape or Mocha, right? So what can we do? So Cypress is a tool. You install it just like regular dev dependency using npm. It installs itself. It's a cross-platform Electron app. That means, so depending on your platform, it will download a binary that will be built for Windows or for Mac or for Linux. So we open source the whole thing. It's not feature limited. You can go to GitHub, and please go to GitHub and star it so we have more stars. That's how I get paid in GitHub stars. Just go there, and you can see the code. You can clone it. You can fork it. You don't have to worry that the tool will disappear. It's completely 100% MIT licensed open source tool. Now, it doesn't mean that you can just fork it and rebrand it as like Pine.io and start selling it. Because we wrote the core of the tool in CoffeeScript, which naturally prevents people from like copying and taking advantage. It's a great copyright protection thing. And also we have a lot of documentation, and I'll mention documentation, but there is great introduction to Cypress and writing your first test. Here's how a test looks. The test should almost look like you're writing English sequence of actions that the user is taking. Almost like a user story that a product owner or product manager brings to you, hey, can you implement this? So in this case, I want to visit this localhost 3000. I want to get an element with a CSS selector class, new to do, and it should be visible. That's a test. And you don't have to wait anything. Every command just gets added to the queue, and Cypress will execute first action. When it's done and it's successful, then it will execute the second action, and so on. So you don't have to worry about async await, promises, almost never. You don't have to put waits. A more complex test would visit the page, get element with .new to do, probably an input box, and then type learn testing, and then special enter. So kind of to simulate the enter event from the user keyboard. And then it can continue typing and type be cool and press another enter. Now the syntax is kind of similar to jQuery. If you grab the element, you can keep working with it and just keep changing commands, and you can maybe get some other child element and do something with the child element. And then you want to get to the list items, so the CSS selector can be longer, and it should have length too, because I typed 2 items, I pressed enter twice, I added first item, I added second item. My to-do list should have 2 items. And let me just show how this looks. So this is my to-do app at localhost 3000. So I can add, 1 to-do. I can mark them. So I'm trying to test this application. All right, everyone with me? And so I have my application running locally. And now from just looking at the slides, I want to switch to actual code, and we're going to go for a couple of tests, and we're going to see how they look, how they behave, what Cypress does, and so on. I'm not trying to convince you that this is the best thing ever for end-to-end testing. I'm just trying to show the tool that I love, and I love using and working on it, and maybe it will convince you to give it a try. Again, completely free. You don't have to buy anything. But the tool is pretty good. OK, so I have my little server running. It has a JSON REST API. It just has a couple of to-dos. That's it. I can see it here. So I have my code right here. And I already installed Cypress using npm install dev. So here's my first test, right? We've seen this before. So let me just start Cypress. So Cypress has 2 modes. When I do npx Cypress open, it starts in a GUI mode. And it's an Electron-based app, so it takes a couple seconds to start, just like Atom. Somehow VS Code solved the problem much better. So right now, I see the list of my test files, my specs. So if I click on the short spec, can guys in the back see this I apologize because I cannot zoom right now at this resolution. So I see my website iframed on the right. So my localhost, and it just shows the URL, localhost 3000 is here, and this is the iframe of my to-do application. It's fully working application. You know, I can interact. It just runs in iframe. On the left, you see the command area. And these are all the commands from my test. So the test opens the page, and the first command was visit, and then the URL, so it just shows visit. So this is a typical GUI. This test is not really interesting. Let's maybe look at the second test. So I want to visit localhost 3000. I want to get new to do, right? And I'm making an assertion that it should be visible, right? That the input box actually appears. So because I saved this file, Cypress is watching my specs, so it will rerun the test like automatically. So I can keep it open on one screen and keep working my text editor, and it will keep rerunning my test as soon as I save a file. So that's kind of like test-driven end-to-end development. So the test visited localhost 3000. Then it got an element with class new to do. And as I hover, you can see that it actually highlights the element that it found in the iframe. So what happens, and you will see it a little bit further, Cypress knows when you dump changes, and it takes snapshots of a dump of your application so you can go back and see how the application looked at that particular step. So I grabbed that element, and then I sorted that it's visible, and it was visible. So the test is passing. Let's look at another test, adds two to-dos only. Okay, by the way, let me just restart this. And because Cypress observes your application, it's in iframe. Cypress is running right outside it, inside the browser, and I can run any Chromium-based browser. Cypress immediately knows when something changes in a DOM, or when a network request happens, or when a cookie gets set, or local storage gets updated. So whenever I run the test, it never has to wait. It just keeps flying. Compared to Selenium that has to just send a request as a JSON REST API call through a driver, and then hope that there is a right kind of state of a browser, and then if it doesn't, send another request, and then if it doesn't happen, another request. This is immediate. This is as like, instead of sending with WebDrive it would be like postal pigeon, or just telling you directly, hey, something. Like that's the difference in distance and what we can do. Okay, so in this case, again, as I'm hovering, it shows the DOM at that particular command. So visited localhost 3000, my app looked like this. And then my app actually executed XHR call. I'm not actually encoding anything, but Cypress acts like a proxy, so it knows all the AJAX calls that are going outside my application, so it actually tells me that my app, to-do MVC app, did a call to the server. Not only that, you see how it actually shows me before and after snapshot? It noticed that before dump and after were different. So it shows me that after this XHR completed, all of a sudden I got a couple to-dos. My server sent me all the to-dos that I added from previous tests, and we're going to deal with that later. And then my app grabbed new to-do, and then it typed learn testing, and it actually shows with like dot which particular element it typed into. And then it types some more, and it actually shows how the item was added before, like after that command. I can click on a command to pin it, and then I can inspect before and after. And when my application did another post, it saved that item. And then I got a selector, so I got the list items, and it highlights all the items that it found. And it even shows that it found 6 matched elements. And then the assertion failed. And the text of assertion. So, people can evaluate testing tools with different criteria. Cross-browser, does it support mobile? How much does it cost? How steep is the learning curve? For me, there was only one criteria that immediately kind of told me these people know what they're doing, so I should adopt it. The first time my test failed, just like this, and I saw the error message, I was like, these people get it, right? As opposed to like an exception, assertion failed, true equals false, right? Every assertion tells me exactly what happened, what were the elements involved. It's very specific to the type of error, but it gets better. So this is, I'm running in Electron browser that comes with Cypress, but I can pick any Chrome-based browsers, and Firefox will be supported soon. I can pop DevTools, because this is a real browser. And almost for every step, if I click on that step, it actually provides all the details in DevTools as well. It actually tells me if I write printed output to your console. I mean, the dev experience is just optimized to like interacting with your tests, rerunning them, debugging the failure, right? So in this case, if I click on this assertion, it actually tells me all the subjects, like all the elements that it selected, right? So I can, where did it go? I can look at them. I can see, where they came from, right? I see the message and errors, and every error, like whatever you can, what kind of sources you can, has a specific attributes that will be, dumped here, so you can, debug the failure. So the error messages are like, okay, I know that these developers at Cypress are writing a tool that they themselves are using, just because the development experience is so great. But the second thing that made me like really reconsider my life choices was this. Will anyone argue when I say the web applications in the modern days are not synchronous, right? Things happen when they happen, sometimes out of order, right? Okay, good. So I can just say, get me this list items, and then immediately it has to be 2. No, right? So notice when the test runs, these commands run extremely quickly, but this command just watch blue. Quickly, quickly, blue. See, like it's spinning, and only then it fails. So Cypress by default knows that whenever you expect text to appear or elements to be visible, not visible, removed, added to the DOM, it's never going to be instant. So by default, it waits for up to 4 seconds for assertion to pass, right? So this assertion, whenever it tries to compare a number of elements, will say, oh, it's not 2 elements yet. It's like, in this case, 8. So it reruns the previous command, get, again, after 10 milliseconds, and again looks at, oh, do I have just 2 elements? No. Well, I'll wait 10 milliseconds, and I'll ask for elements again and again. And as long as it's not passing, it will retry and retry up to 4 seconds. So here's what we can do. For every command, we can just say, OK, don't just wait for 4 seconds, wait for 6 minutes or 10 minutes. So notice it just keeps waiting. It keeps retrying, hoping that there'll be only 2 list items, really, really bad, right? It's really sad, because sometimes the 2 elements will never appear, right? It's like waiting for Godot, right? OK. So, yes?
So let's say my server is not responding, right?
Yeah.
To some network issue or something.
Yeah.
So will it make 10 millisecond call every time, or it will wait for that request to be completed and then make another call?
So for XHRs, the rules are different, but they're not for XHRs, it's actually easy, because you don't have to ask for 10 milliseconds, is my XHR over? Now, you just subscribe to that XHR, and just when it completes, then you immediately know. But there is a time limit for XHRs. You can change it as well and say, if XHR is not resolved within 30 seconds, I think, then time out and fail the test. Okay? So there are different rules. There are rules on how long a page can take to load, right? So they're intelligent, and you can change all of them. So in this case, I changed just a single command timeout, but I can change it globally. So it keeps spinning, it's hoping that there are only 2 list items. Here's what we can do. Why don't we help it, right? So right now, look how every time I click, it actually changes the number that it got. Got 9, got 8, 7, 6. Now, if I were a bad person, I would force everyone to count down with me, but I'm not going to do that. So right now I have 6, 5, 4, 3, boom. It found its 2 items that it was waiting for, and it passed the test. Okay? Because the web is asynchronous. You can never say things will happen immediately. So this is built into every command. So if you look at, like I kind of gave a comment, assertion command. So anytime you see like should or expect, it will retry its previous command up to like timeout, which is very, very handy. That's why you never see, side.wait. There is command side.wait, but you almost never have to use that. Okay, so that's nice. The question is, how do you remember all these commands, right? So here's something that I forgot to do, I think, honestly. If I go to Cypress documentation, which is like #1 resource. So when we went open source, we have to do something about docs because AngularJS docs were not very good. People hated it. People hate Webpack documentation. So the projects, succeed, are successful, or die based on docs. So we invested a lot of time in writing the docs. We have a lot of concepts and guides, but my favorite page as a user was API. So all the commands like click, local storage, debug, focus, get is here, all of them, right? So for example, reload. Reloads the page, great. You're probably testing like local storage or some cookie. You do some operations, reload the page, and then do assertions. By the way, Cypress between each test blows away the iframe and starts a new iframe so that one test cannot affect another test. So you always have a clean slate. You can actually work against it and not follow this practice, but we think it's a good practice. So every command has syntax, usage, arguments, examples, rules, and so on. So the docs for everything is great. But it's not enough, right? Who uses TypeScript every day? Not you, Jeff. No, you hate it, right? Okay. So Cypress is written in CoffeeScript. Who cares? But we ship with TypeScript definitions. That means that even in my JavaScript file, if I add this magical line, reference type Cypress, because everything is a global, right? Size global variable. You don't have to import it. If you add that magical line, all of a sudden a smart editor like VS Code will show you IntelliSense for everything. Right? Examples, links to API docs. So you don't really have to remember anything. And this even works with things like should. So I can be visible, right? And it even shows me IntelliSense for assertions. Cypress comes with all the batteries included, including chai, Sinon chai, jQuery chai, Lodash, Moment, all those little nice things. So you don't have to do. You can add, but you don't have to. And so the chai assertions are all there. So the docs are nice. Okay, something else that we should probably do. We should probably reset the state so that every test starts with just 0 to-dos. So on my server, I have a special endpoint called reset. So I can reset the database. So I can move all my things that reset the state, that visit localhost in before each block, and then every test after that will start fresh, right? And doesn't have to visit the page and so on. So here's how it looks. I should probably comment out these things. I really want to just run that test. So we put a lot of thought into like what's the best practice, how do you clear the state, and we write this in our documentation, right? So you should not, for example, assume that one test sets something up and then another test relies it. You should not try to clean up after the test because you might crash and then all the tests will crash, but you will not find the true cause, right, correctly. Okay, and one other thing, so just for this demo. So let me again enable this test, right, that was failing. Yes. Okay, so it fails. Now this is nice when I run locally. I like the UI. I'm super happy with that. Great. Now let me exit this, and instead of opening Cypress in a GUI mode, I'm going to use a command called Cypress run, which is a headless mode, and this is what you would run on your CI. So it will not pop anything. This is the worst color scheme. Come on. Let me change colors to something. Okay. So it started right here. It tells me that it found 3 spec files. It's running in a browser. You can change browser and so on. So the first spec worked. Everything was fine. Each spec, by default, is recorded in video. Right? It comes standard, built-in. You don't have to configure anything. You don't have to install drivers. You don't have to install fonts, fiddle with Windows encoding, and so on. So the videos are all going to be there by default. When it started the second test, and it failed too many elements, right? Like we expected this. And then screenshots. Every time a test fails, it automatically takes a screenshot, so I can actually take that one, open that one. You can take screenshots yourself as much as you want, but this is built in. Let me just grab it. So Cypress, why can't I select it? So I can see how my freaking website looked when it crashed, which is already one head above every other testing tool. Because imagine you go to CI, something failed. Well, the first thing you do, you're like, I'm going to check out the code and I'll try to recreate it locally. If if I can recreate, then great, I can debug it. If not, you're out of luck. At least here I have video, I have screenshots, everything. Great. Okay, so this is nice. And CI, we provide all the Docker images, list of dependencies. You can run it on any CI system, which is nice. Okay, finger pointing. Sharon actually brought a point today, which reminded me to do something that I didn't do before. So here's my test. I have a little test called stores to do, where I'm visiting, I'm typing a couple to-dos, I assume, check that there are 2 items, I reload the page, and I check again to make sure that those 2 items are still there. So get new to-do, type, get to-do list, should have length greater or equal to 2, reload the page, and then the page should contain this selector with text. Okay, so let me see, show how it looks, or show how it looks in a GUI mode. This test is called local reload. Okay, it's running against localhost. It's all passing. So it got new to do, typed something else, grabbed the elements, expected to have length at least 2, reloaded the page, and then it found those to-dos. Now, by the way, we encourage the opposite approach of unit testing. In unit testing, you should set one thing and do a single assertion. When another test should do another thing, a single assertion. Otherwise, it's hard to debug. Now, when you have a GUI and you have video, don't do that. Just write long specs that correspond to like the whole user story, If something fails, it's so easy to debug using this tool and the video and the logs, right? Like, there's no point in limiting yourself to like add to do, assert, next test. Just write the whole story so it's obvious like how a user would actually go and do their thing. Okay, great. I'm running against local host 3000. I can also run against something else. Like what? Like this little website. To do mvc.com examples AngularJS. Let's see how that looks. So I'm gonna run my reload spec. Look at the URL. I'm testing freaking to do MVC, right? And everything is still passing. Like, it works exactly the same way, except I'm testing a remote system. So my tests can run locally. I can point them at staging. I can point them at production. I can run a subset of tests against production, maybe to be more careful, right? I can test some other repo if I want to. Now, at one point, we decided, together with other people, but we're going to take over to do mvc.com because they have end-to-end Selenium tests that are awful, that everyone hates, that are flaky. And we asked, like, well, can't Cypress just replace it? And we're just going to use that. So we started looking at, like, they have more than, I forgot, like 60 different to-do MVC implementations. And we use the same set of tests, right? And it was a mess because every application was broken in their own way, right? Just broken. Things were not loading, things were not working correctly, not stored in storage, not routing correctly. And I think it's because of bad tests. People were skipping them. People were adding all sorts of exceptions just to make their implementation work. So at some point, we just give up. We're like, all the hacks I had to go through to actually make everything, or almost everything pass, made the tool look bad because like all the tests became like this ginormous if spaghetti of things, right? So it's just a personal. Anyway, so this is finger pointing.
Which means there's no more excuse that it works on my machine.
Absolutely, no.
And you can run the same suite of tests against prod.
Yes.
Without having to go in and come up with prod code.
Exactly. And you can, in Cypress, it's very easy to stop XHR calls or spine them, stop JavaScript, so you can stop a payment system and don't make accidental thing, and you can do it depending on environment. So it's easy to test real world and just kind of, stop whatever it should not happen for real. And this is how I felt. My present to Jeff. Okay. Where do you love a tool, obviously. Where can you find out more? So we became a real company when we got our own egghead.io course, right? Which came out like a month ago. But you don't have to pay for it. We have almost the same content for free. The same person used to work at Cypress, and he made a whole bunch of tutorials where you write an application and you test it with end-to-end. Now, look behind you. I have a special surprise. This person is standing right there. My really, really good recordings. My personal are his Ramda videos, but you don't have to use Ramda if you don't want to. But you should. But you should. It's excellent, right? So thank you, Andrew, for doing excellent, excellent video tutorials. Awesome. So today I went through Angular CLI. Angular CLI by default installs protractor tests, but it's so easy to just add Cypress. And the cool thing about this is that, so you don't have to use TypeScript. You don't have to use the TypeScript definitions because sometimes there could be conflict or it could be hard to configure. You bring another big tool, okay? So to get the most out of Cypress in your scaffolded project with ng-CLI, just add reference types to your specs. And if you're not sharing code, like that's great. This gives you IntelliSense, but it doesn't actually solve a problem where you could have misspelled names, right? It just thinks, I don't know. So the way you solve this and you get full benefits of TypeScript. You just add TS check to your JavaScript, and all of a sudden, right, you get full benefits of TypeScript checking in your JavaScript specs that use Cypress. Now, in this case, property visit2 does not exist on type, blah, blah, blah. Did you mean visit? I mean, what great tool. And we were actually looking at, in Cypress at some point to do something similar and have like a distance so we can actually suggest the right things. But instead we did the following. We actually show the same thing, type error. Nice. So imagine you're not a developer. Or imagine you are QA who tries to make the code more testable. So you will say, okay, I don't know how to select that input box, or I don't know how to select this li element so I can make an assertion. So we made this, it's called selector playground. So you press this icon, and then you hover over an element, and it actually gives you a suggestion and a command to actually grab it. And I know, this deserves. Obviously, I did not do it, but I'll take the credit. The great thing about this is that you can configure it, and for example, not just select the ID or class, but you can configure like data attributes. Like if you always use like data-test as attribute in your markup for testing, you can just configure and it will actually suggest that particular value as opposed to ID. So you can configure it to give you a test attribute, right? Okay, and then you can just copy and paste it directly into your spec file. Okay, so this works, but still it's too much trouble. So just use Angular Seed from Minko Genchev. He includes Cypress by default, easy win, so you don't have to do anything else. Question, how does Cypress make money? When you start Cypress, it has this tab called runs, and see how it is showing me like all my runs for this particular project. So this was successful, shows GitHub comments with some like branches, how many tests I ran, and so on. So you don't have to manage all your test artifacts, your videos, your screenshots, the data about each particular test. You can just send it all to Cypress. We run as a SaaS platform, a thing where the test runner can just send the recorded things. If you set the flag and have an ID, it will send it to our platform, and then you have a dashboard where you can inspect everything and it has other cool features. It's especially interesting when you work on a project, you work on something else for a month, and then you go back and you have to debug a failure, and you're like, how did it work before? Oh, well, I see the video of a working run versus a failed run, so I can see where it went wrong. We are now actually actively working on the dashboard. We're adding like automated spec load balancing. So if you have 10 CI machines, you run 10 specs, one on each machine, and you don't have to configure anything. So your tests run and finish faster. And we give you insight into each failure. So it makes sense to pay for the dashboard, but we only charge for private projects. If you run open source or a public project where you want people to see the results, it's free. So I think it's pretty fair bargain. Okay. So, but you don't have to do it but this allows us to open source the test runner and not try to charge for it, not limited it in features, nothing. I'm going to skip this because, actually, no, I'm not going to skip it. Okay, so I talked about the testing pyramid. So think about integration testing, where you don't have a full page, you don't have a web application, but you have a couple of components, maybe a component with a stub data service. How do you test that? So what do you need to actually test a component? Not the whole web app, but a component. Well, you need probably a real browser, because real browser is a complex freaking thing with lots of APIs, lots of its own quirks. You don't want to use just dumb emulation of a real browser, because real browsers have bugs. GSDOM is very, very much behind in features, and it has its own bug. So why would you actually test your component that has bugs on this thing that has bugs behind this thing that has other bugs? So You need real browser. You want to clean up state before, and you want like the whole API. You want to be able to stop, to see results, everything. So you really need the full end-to-end environment. Only you bring, instead of the whole page, you bring just a component and some supporting code. And you want to be able to see things, right? Notice in this case, like I don't actually test URL. I'm testing some weird thing because I'm testing just a component, and it's fully functioning component inside an iframe. So I have a bunch of, so you install Cypress and you install a framework-specific adapter. Everything I showed you before is framework agnostic. It only works through the DOM, through XHR, through local storage, through the window, through document. It never actually cared which app. So I actually ran the same test locally against Vue app, but I ran it against AngularJS onto the MVC, and it worked the same. Now, in this case, we're trying to test a framework-specific component, so we have to bring an adapter. So I'm installing AngularJS adapter. Imagine I have some code in my app.js, just some weird, nothing fancy. My test looks like this. Instead of loading or visiting a page, I have this mount function from the adapter, and I'm just mounting a template. And that's it. And now I have fully functioning mini AngularJS application. Now, the good news, it's really easy to write with adapters for all frameworks. The bad news, except for Angular. But mount component, right, that takes your component and actually scaffolds and starts it up in an iframe is a pain to write in Angular. It's not really well documented. The Angular team actually allocated one person to work on it, so I hope they can help me fix it. Okay, I always argue from authority because nobody listens to me when I present well-argued arguments. So Jeff, like sitting right there, don't look at him, he will get red. He wrote an excellent blog post, which he suggested we publish on our blog, where he expressed his love for Cypress. Now, what did you use before Cypress?
Protractor.
Okay, so nothing, really. No, I'm just kidding. Right? Go and read it. It's full of love and and arguments why the tool is great. And you can ask Jeff for a real story behind how much I had to pay him to. And I wrote a little blog post like how to set up Cypress for protractor projects with TypeScript. We don't bundle TypeScript by default. We're talking about that. You can write your specs in JavaScript, and we have a bundler, so you can split your code, organize it well, import, export. We transpile everything. But we don't bundle TypeScript because we're not sure which settings you want to use, which version of TypeScript, and so on. So it still is up in the air. So you have to actually configure it yourself, which is kind of a little bit of a pain. And I want to finish this presentation with 2 tweets that came out today. So people, try Cypress. The barrier is very low. Just npm install. Don't pay anything. Don't register. Nothing. Just go and try it. And so this tweet was really nice. Aliases. I didn't show aliases, but that's not important. Custom commands. So you're not limited to like site visit, site get. You can write your own commands and attach it to Cypress. I actually hate it because why would you write a command if you can just write normal function and use your site commands there? That way you're not polluting the global space, but everyone loves commands. So you can save your data in fixtures, so you can stop server or load fixtures straight from JSON or image files. But I think this tweet, despite being really nice and really strong, doesn't express what you feel when you try Cypress. I think this is a more descriptive one.
This is closer to my reaction.
Yes. Yeah. And other people. So there is a person in testing community and React community, Ken Sidatz, who's been doing a lot of testing and a lot of workshop on React and good development practices. So he immediately replies, "Oh, look, I've been, telling people the world about Cypress, for 2 years now. So, not my fault." It's Better late than never. So I want to thank everyone, and here are the resources. You can go to Cypress, GitHub, look at the tool, and the slides are here, and I'll put the link on the Meetup as well. So, any questions? Yes?
I have a question about integration tests. It's possible to load the real test into these, you call the fixtures, and then you play them in its integration?
So, no. This comes up every time, right? Like every day people like, well, I don't want to just manually create the fixture files. I want to record like me using the website kind of, or like the test running. So it's easy to do in a very basic functionality because like what do you record? What about all the dynamic data? What about cookies, right? So it's easy to kind of create hello world of that, but it's really hard to set up a good thing that works for everyone in the real world. So instead of doing that, what I suggest, so here's my test, right? Actually, not this one, this is, let me restart so I have my local server here. Here's one thing that I did not go into detail. So if I run my test, like here. So for example, so this did XHR, so it shows you're doing Ajax, your app is doing Ajax calls to get to-dos. When I click on that, it actually prints the XHR call here, so it's easy for me to look at response, right? Copy this into JSON file, dump it, maybe edit a little bit. So for now, you can just easily look at the history of your calls and put some of them in a fixture. And when using a fixture is very easy. So if I have, okay. So here's me using the fixture, right? I just say route. I can add method, but in this case it's get by default /todos, and fx is short for fixture. And the name of the file, so my file is todos. And here's a fixture that I dumped directly from a call. Boom. So it's so easy to do it manually because you don't have to stub everything, I think, right? Now, our dashboard, for example, uses all stubbed APIs. When we test our like big application, the dashboard with lots of little edge cases and everything, we actually stub the whole API. So it runs really quickly without any server. So, but we put the fixtures there like from DevTools manually. Okay. So no, but I don't think it's that difficult to do this way. Yes. No, Andrew, you don't get a question. No. Go ahead, please. Sorry.
We write our user stories in Gherkin. Any integration with Cucumber for an acceptance-driven development?
Yes. So if I go here and Cucumber, so there is a search, right, on the documentation page. Nobody finds the search. It's ridiculous because it's the same color as the rest of the page, right? So it really hides there. But if you click there, someone else wrote a Cucumber plugin which can translate the Gherkin syntax into our spec when it loads and transpiles, so you can write your syntax there. I personally don't see why anyone would do that, but because I'm used to the API. And I think the API is well thought, so, but it's definitely a different style.
You can talk to people who aren't programmed.
Yes, I understand. Yes, Andrew.
On the stubbing, I was going to point out one of the benefits of this that I tout every time I talk about this is the fact that you can stub that response to be a 500 or a 404 or a 401 and make sure your UI reacts as appropriate, which is very hard with true end-to-end tests in Selenium. I actually worked at a company where they would shut servers down every Thursday afternoon from 3 to 4. I'm not even making that up. So that QA could go in and test all the error scenarios, which meant the developers couldn't work, so we'd go and get coffee for an hour, and then it would
So in this case, it's an excellent point, right? So here's me stubbing, and I don't have to stub. I don't have to return a mock response. I can just spy and like wait for that request. But in this case, I'm stubbing this route to do's with that file, and when I'm visiting the page, and in this case, I don't care about the server anymore. I don't care about it actually doesn't reset the state. So I'm not resetting it, and then I'm adding things. Here's the cool thing about UI. This test ran, and on top of a test, now you have those routes, and it shows method get URL to do's, stubbed, yes, and it was intercepted one time. And so whenever I see this get 200 to do's, now it shows XHR stub. So the UI makes it clear when you stub, when you spy, how many times it was called. And again, like I can dump things into the console with all the details. So stubbing is one of the, again, Cypress knows your app. And it always works through the DOM, right? Through the standard things. It's a real browser. It doesn't use debug protocol, doesn't use extensions, right? And it also absorbs all the network requests. So it kind of looks at the boundary of your application. The knowledge that you invest in testing with Cypress is not really framework specific, or even Cypress specific, because you're only working through the DOM and web interfaces, right? When you work your website and you're trying to test, you're like, okay, I need to trigger a click event, or like I need to, to type. I can look at local storage. Well, you don't have to learn anything Cypress specific, really. Yes, there is get local storage, but what does it do? Well, you just go to your local storage and you look around, like which key you want to grab. There's no hooks, no services to inject, right? So the amount of time you invest in learning how to test your app through the periphery of a browser, which is like its DOM, its local storage, its network, it's very portable to in your life. Anyway, I went on a rant. Yes. Yes.
So when you can step through the tests in the UI, it's clear that you're taking DOM snapshots.
Yes.
Right?
So you kind of see how it looked.
Is there a possible way to store those actual snapshots as opposed to just pictures?
Yes. Well, you have to grab it yourself, right? Okay. So when you get sci-get, selector, right? Then you get jQuery element.
Okay.
Right?
So if I wanted to do that, I could put it into the script and do it myself.
Right, and then you can do sci write file. You can save it, right? There is also a new command called, and Andrew doesn't know it even, right? It was after his time. You can do sci task, where it will actually go into the node code, and when you have full power of node, and you can do put it in a database, observe a database, right? So we have this new command that goes from browser right into the node, and there, the sky is the limit. But I want to show you something else, you mentioned when you step through the commands. Here's the cool command that I only learned 8 months after I joined Cypress, and then I was like, how did nobody tell me about this, right? It should be the first thing. So when you put sci-pause anywhere, it actually pauses the freaking test, and then I can resume or step through commands. And so I can do one by one. How cool is this thing, right? And at each point, I can just open DevTools and see exactly what it's doing. And I didn't know. And I was already a fan. And when I found out, I was like, I'm quitting. You guys hid this jewel away from me. People can be mean, like a movie, Mean Girls. Anyway, yeah. So sci-pause was a great discovery, and you step through each thing, and yeah.
You said that there was some work still going on to get Firefox working?
Yes.
So you run everything in an iframe of a particular browser?
Yes. So if you look, so when you run Cypress, you have this drop-down, and it shows all the browsers that it found on the system. So if I had Chrome Canary, it would be there, and soon Firefox will be there. Okay. And then I can switch the browser, and when I run the test, it actually starts Chrome right here, See, like I'm already in Chrome, so that's why I have like 2 Chrome icons. So Electron, excuse me, is always a little bit behind, right? Because Electron has to wrap Chromium, so it's always a little bit behind the main Chrome. And then it has to be bundled into Electron project, okay? So some of the newer APIs are not available Electron. In that case, you should run all your tests, and you can run them by passing browser flag, and then it will use Chrome, for example. And we provide Docker images with Chrome included as well. So, but soon will be Firefox. We do everything in open source, so you can go look at pull request, Firefox support. As you can see, the tests are still failing. But just so people know, right, look at the amount of work that actually went into this. Right. Oh, first, yeah, so it's a lot of effort to support even a modern browser like Firefox. People ask, what about AE11? Like, yeah, I mean, if I want to end my life early, I guess. But here's a funny joke, which is not a joke, which is a true story. Someone put an actual bounty on adding IE11 support in Cypress. They put some money behind it, right? Yes. I forgot if it was like $11 or $15. And I was like, keep the change. Like, I'll do it for $9. So, yeah. Okay, so the trade-offs. Right now it's limited to Chrome. The thing for me is that these are different types of testing, right? Cypress is specifically for functional testing. Does my app actually work, right? Can I go through all the operations? Is it configured correctly? Can I do, my database calls, everything? Once you cover those, and they work very well and flake-free, right, and stable, then there are bugs that are truly cross-browser bugs. Maybe IE doesn't render some CSS, Firefox does something else. In that case, you need a tool that does those types of tests, or is easy to configure for cross-browser, and then you can just write a couple of tests using Selenium or Test Cafe or something else, right, for those browsers, for those particular bugs. But for functionality, 90% of my problems with the web is not the broken font, it's that like I cannot use this thing. So that's my takeaway on cross-browser support. But Firefox seems like a reasonable thing, and it only is making our Cypress more robust because it has to support 2, and it's making us kind of re-architecture so it's more generic, so it's a good thing. By the way, don't be scared by 600 open issues. Like these are duplicates of like one. No, it's a lot of issues, but there's 1,000 closed. And the project has been around for 4 years, so there's like 11,000 commits. Most of the commits is like fix test, merge, right? But it still is a lot of work that went into this tool over a couple of years. Well, thank you so much for inviting. Thank you.